Hello, my name is Rick Anderson, and I'm going to show you selections from the Environment GCSE 9.1 Environment quiz and presentation lesson plan. Now, environment is a subject that pupils, around age 15, 16 are very interested in. We know that, and if you can just add a bit of science theory and technique to that, you can score pretty high marks on 15-20% of the questions in GCSE science because it's on environment. So here's a bit of a lesson plan and a quiz for you to see, and this one's free because it's relatively small. I do offer one or two other things like maths for science, biology, science business, which have a small fee because they're a lot longer, and you may want to look at those. But this one's absolutely for free for ethical reasons as well as financial reasons as well. So just before we look at the quiz, just a selection of the lesson plan slides, and you can see we cover basic greenhouse gases, chemical pollution, carbon dioxide, chemistry, physics and biology aspects. For instance, physics, looking at alternative energies as means of reducing energy use and hence reducing global warming through less CO2. I point out, where the environment covers in each of the three syllabuses, for biology, physics and chemistry. Some, traditional slides. I've put together things like all of the pollutants and greenhouse gases, where do they come from, what's their effect, and also, for instance, different fuel sources from physics, what's the pros and what's the cons. That features a lot, doesn't it, in GCSE questions. And then I've done a process diagram showing how it all fits together, and then finally some questions and model answers. And so if we look at the quiz, you can see it's an interactive quiz. You eventually get the right answer there, what's the best description of a fossil fuel and so forth, and you get a very quick indication of whether you've got a right answer or not. And these are the general, first of all, the general basic questions about environment and pollution. We then go into specifics like physics, energy, renewables, and you can see here you can select an A, B or C. Unit of measure for energy, we know that's joules, so put that in there. And so some of the elements are designed quite nicely like this, so you put in an A or a D for advantage, disadvantage. We'll try a D there, and we get a D for disadvantage because fossil fuel power stations are not renewable. And then a similar sort of questions for solar and wind and so forth. Chemistry, one or two numerical things like how much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and we know it's 0.04%, so we'll try a C there. It has risen to 0.4% in the last year or two. Then one or two process flows because crackers, refinery and so forth. We have to fit the right letter to the right part of the diagram, and you can see there we get a correct answer in the end. And that's the chemistry part. Biology, quite a lot about the temperature rise and the CO2 rise, quite a familiar graph, and correlation between CO2 rise and temperature rise, and questions around that as well. Deforestation, there's some questions as well, and also a little bit of statistics. That does come into science quite a lot, doesn't it? A bit of maths for science there. And then a test at the end to cover the whole thing, all three aspects: physics, chemistry, biology. And there's, for instance, a nice set of data from the government actually on Arctic sea ice extent, and there's a question around that. Now that's not in the syllabus, but you could get a question where you get a graph from that's not in the syllabus but is relevant to the environment, where you have to answer some questions on it. And so, for instance, we have to do a bit of interpretation of the graph to see what the percentage reduction is, and then to see what the best way of combating that Arctic reduction is. And we eventually come to B, and that's the wrong answer. It's actually asking what's not a solution, so more deforestation is not a solution. Okay, thank you very much. Hope that helps.